You think you hate my art? No, I hate my art way worse than you do. Trust me. Have you seen my art? It's terrible. Like, whoa, this is so bad. Who told this guy he can draw? Probably people who don't have eyes, because if they saw this, they would be screaming. My comics are terrible. My art is bad. Everything I'm doing right now is absolutely the worst. Why on God's green earth would anyone ever look at your terrible, terrible drawings? That's exactly what happens every time I sit down to draw or I finish a drawing. It is honestly one of the worst things in the world, but I have to think that I'm not the only person out there who experiences this. And that's why today I want to talk to you about artistic evolution and also not listening to those stupid little voices in your head when it comes to art. It's not worth it. The whole idea with the video today was sort of to think about and talk about what it's like when I sit down to draw. And sometimes it feels like when I draw, I am the only person in the world who's ever experienced what I like to call like negative self-talk. And it is sometimes pretty debilitating. You sit down at the table, you start drawing, you're pretty stoked on what you're working on. And then after about, I don't know, maybe let's say you're halfway through the drawing and you take a step back to look at it just to see if you're on the right track. And then you start to see it. Every single possible flaw that you could ever see in any drawing ever has now appeared on the piece in front of you, whether it's a comics page, a pinup, a illustration for whatever purpose, you're going to see all of the flaws. And I'm starting to realize that even though that is like a bad thing within me, I'm trying to take it in as something positive. Now, here's what I mean by that. When you notice the stuff that is wrong with your art, you start to pick up on things and change things. When I say bad things with your art, I'm talking about as an artist looking at my own art. I'm not talking about me looking at like someone that I really admire and picking apart what they're doing. Like if I was to look at like Chris Somney's stuff, to me it just all looks amazing. But part of me has to think that when Chris is sitting down at the drawing table working on his stuff, he has to see something that's wrong with it. I mean, that's what's pushed him to become the artist that he is in some level, right? When you have this kind of flaw within your own approach to your art, I think it's important to not take it as a flaw and instead use it to your advantage by pushing you to go further. So while I talk, one of the things that I wanted to do was take a look at an old piece of art. I don't like looking at my old art. I really hate it. But in this instance, I actually think it's probably a pretty good thing to look at it and then redraw it to see if maybe I could do a better job at it the second time around with where I'm at now. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to tell you a little story about how this has played out with me personally before. When I started doing the history of hardcore, I did it mostly as a means to try and make an actual comic. For a long time, I had been really critiquing comics and finding ways to say, hey, this doesn't look good, this is weird, why did this work and why didn't that work? I was talking to somebody critiquing a comic and they brought up the point of like, how can you critique a comic if you never actually tried making one? And it got me thinking like, yeah, maybe I should try doing that. And so I started doing comics and then I just kind of like fell in love with it. Additionally, I also have a background in art. So my dad is an artist. So like, for example, when my dad was 18 years old, he drew this thing. There's this other piece he did that's amazing. And like, that's just his early work. So it was ingrained in me early that quality is important when it comes to your art. Especially when I looked at my dad's stuff, I was just amazed by it. Yet whenever I would watch him draw, he would kind of agonize over even the smallest details. And so maybe it's me picking up on that and bringing it to my own work. But when it dawned on me that I should be making a comic, I drew what is issue 1 of the History of Hardcore, and I actually don't have any more copies left. It's very rudimentary, and I put it on Kickstarter and was able to get people to buy it, and a lot of people supported me, which was really nice. However, after a few years of looking at it and eventually realizing, okay, I need to get to part 2, I looked at it and I was shocked by what I saw. Like, I didn't like anything that I had drawn, and it was really eye-opening because I had wanted to continue the story. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to collect this together in one book, this has to look the same. And I don't draw like this anymore. I draw what I thought at the time was like way better than how I was drawing at the time of when I drew that first part. What I ended up doing was I redrew that whole first part when I started working on the complete History of Hardcore. I redrew those 25 pages in that new style. And then from there, I continued working on the book. So in essence, I kind of did it all at once. Now, here's the sick joke. I look at the History of Hardcore now, and I still love the book, and I already know how I would approach it differently. I was thinking about, do any other comic book artists out there have this experience? And like, can you see it happening on the page? And I was recently talking with somebody about Andrew McLean, who's probably one of my favorite current working artists, and Trad Moore, another one of my favorite artists. And what's crazy about their work is if you look at the very first issue of Headlopper and then the most recent issue of Headlopper, they don't look at all the same. And even in that first volume, if you were to go from part 1 to part 2, then to part 3, and all the way through up until the volumes up until now, Andrew's art style on Headlopper has changed significantly. And then if you think about like Trad Moore, right? Trad Moore, we kind of think of as now this guy who's got this wacky style that's so like fluid and loose and very ethereal. But if you look at the early issues of his book with Justin Jordan, the Luther Strode series, it is not at all how Trad draws now. When it comes to this drawing that I'm working on right now, I wanted to do a series of Avengers drawings because, at the time I was just trying to build up a name for myself. And I thought, what if I combine the Avengers and Hardcore and made them into like this band and that they were on tour or something like that. And I remember at the time being so stoked about this set of drawings. Like, I loved it and I thought it was such a cool idea. And I recently flipped through some old stuff, just looking at Instagram and kind of looking at what I've done and where I've been as far as my art goes. And yeah, I came across these drawings and I thought to myself, this is so not representative of how I draw anymore at all. When this whole idea for this video came up, I was thinking to myself, like, yeah, you know what? Those are the ones that I'm going to work on. And it worked out because they just released the trailer for Avengers Doomsday, which, not that I really give a rip about any of the Marvel movies, but I thought it was pretty decent timing and coincidental enough to try and really redo some of them. The struggle of looking back on your work and being kind of embarrassed, like, everybody goes through that. Like, as much as you think that now you can do what you used to do way better, rather than focusing on it and trying to change the past, let the past be the past and take what you know from that experience and keep moving forward. I think that's probably a good place to end for today. I actually kind of really like just winging these videos in a weird way. I'm usually not somebody who does wing things. I like to be precise and make sure that everything is pre-written and things like that. But I've just noticed that I think it's easier for me to wrap my head around just being off the cuff. And I think it comes across a little bit more genuine too. So Also, I hope you like the redraw that I did. I have to admit, I have not actually done it at the time of this recording, so whether or not it worked out, fingers crossed, but I think it'll probably be okay. I have more stuff in the works. I actually just finished these pages for a comic that I'm working on, Project Haunted House, which I mentioned in the last video. You know, the fun thing is if you go on my Patreon page, you could have seen it already. So I'll put the link to that in the description below. But yeah, I appreciate you checking out my work. I appreciate you watching this video. And I appreciate you for being interested in art, because that's actually kind of really awesome. And especially comic book artists. There is not enough comics out there that are not mainstream. So if you are an indie person and you're struggling and you are just like hitting a wall and you feel like there is no point to doing your comics, there is a point to doing your comics, and it's because you are doing them. And I think it's important that you keep doing them. And you've been given the ability that you have, whether it's art or lettering or coloring or, writing. The sooner you actually make the comic, the better off you will be. And I know you will not regret it, because by the end of it, you're going to have a tangible object that is something you can show people, you can bring with you, you can send it out to whoever, you can not show it to anybody and keep it for yourself, but it's there and you have it. And that is no small task. Try to progress, but don't do it in a way that's going to kill your vibe or just make you feel terrible about yourself. Nobody wants that. I don't want that for you. You don't want that for you. Comics doesn't want that for you. I will catch you guys later. See ya.